Vancouver Canucks NHL season preview. Let's go. So the new NHL season is just around the corner, and today I wanted to deep dive into the Vancouver Canucks and look at some of the biggest questions surrounding this team heading into the 2022-23 NHL season. Question number 1. Is Spencer Martin a legit NHL backup who will help the Canucks win this year? Now, heading into this year, we all know that Thatcher Demko is penciled in as the true number 1 here. And obviously, we have seen enough of Demko to know that he's a capable number 1. And if he plays well, the Canucks should have a chance to win every night with him in net. However, like all successful teams, the real question is whether the Canucks have a legit backup in someone like Spencer Martin. And can he come in and give them the goaltending they need to win as many games as possible? Ideally, you don't really want Thatcher Demko to play more than 70 games. So hopefully, in my opinion, around the 60 to 65 game mark is enough. And if we look at the stats from last year, the Canucks actually had Halak as their backup. And to be quite honest, he wasn't good enough. Halak came in for 17 games, didn't actually put up horrible numbers, but at the same time, he was only able to help the Canucks win 4 games. The stats don't lie. Usually for teams with playoff aspirations, you probably need your backup to win a little bit more games than that. Hypothetically, let's say a backup plays around 15 to 20 games. The stats show that if they can win at least half or a little bit more, so maybe around 8 to 12 games out of 15, then I think that's actually goes a long way in helping a team like the Canucks secure a playoff spot. So I guess it remains to be seen how good Spencer Martin is, because heading into the training camp, it seems like they're gonna roll with Martin and give him a shot to be a full-time backup this year. Looking at Martin's stats, definitely not much of a sample size here, as he was drafted all the way back in 2013 as a 3rd rounder for the Colorado Avalanche, and since that time, it looks like he spent most of his time in the AHL, ended up playing a total of 9 NHL games. Most recently, last year, he appeared in 6 games for the Canucks with a 1.74 goals against average and a .95 save percentage. Subscribe! Which are pretty decent numbers, but we can't forget that he only played 6 games, which is a very small sample size. And in the AHL last year for the Abbotsford Canucks, he appeared in 25 games and had a 2.43 goals against average, along with a .914 save percentage. So once again, those numbers are actually pretty good, and he actually came out with 19 wins in 25 games. So in some ways, it seems like he might be a little bit too good to stay in the AHL, especially at 27 years old. I feel like his time might be now or never, and it remains to be seen if he can hold down the fort and come in for Demko, maybe for 15 or 20 games. It'll be interesting to see what kind of goaltending he gives the Canucks. So my question to you is, do you think he's a good backup for Thatcher Demko, or should the Canucks get a little bit more insurance in goaltending? Let me know in the comments below. Next question. Can their young stars take their game to the next level? Now, in particular, I want to talk about Elias, Pettersson, and Quinn Hughes. Both very important core franchise players for the Canucks for the present and the future. First off with Pettersson. Obviously a high pick back in 2017. Had a very good start to his NHL career with 66 points as a rookie. But however, for whatever reason, it seems like his production has somewhat fizzled out a bit. In that last season, I would consider it as somewhat of a down year for Pettersson, as he was only able to get 68 points in 80 games, which isn't bad for the average NHL player, but ask most Canuck fans and they would probably tell you that they expected a little more from him, as he's just too good and that isn't really his ceiling. So at 23 years old, he'll be turning 24, heading into year 5. My question for you is, can Pettersson take his game to the next level and possibly set that new career high and be that 80 or 90 point guy that many fans and scouts expect him to be? Because to be quite frank, a lot of the Canucks' success might be dependent on how good of a year Pettersson has. Yes, they have JT Miller who got his 99 points last year, but besides that, if Pettersson can catapult himself into the next level and possibly be an 80 point player, that will probably go a long way in helping the Canucks become a better overall team and possibly squeak into the playoffs. Because if you look at the division rivals such as the Flames and the Oilers, both of those teams definitely had guys in the 100-point category. And I feel like out of everyone in the Canucks' current forward group, besides JT Miller, Pettersson needs to be that guy who takes his game to the next level. So personally, what do you think about Pettersson? Do you think he plateaued as a 68 to 75 point player, or does he have it in him to possibly be a 40 goal and 85 point plus player? Let me know in the comments below. Now, besides Pettersson, I feel like Quinn Hughes is in the same category. Obviously, another young, important piece, especially on the Canucks blue line. And surprisingly, he had an amazing year last year, setting a new career high with 68 points in 76 games. So obviously, his trajectory is trending up. And at only 22 years old, about to turn 23, I feel like Quinn Hughes still has plenty of room and potential to grow and significantly improve for the next 4 to 5 years. Obviously, his defensive game could be better. But my question to Canuck fans heading into this season is, can Quinn Hughes double down from last season and up his production even a little bit more? Ask me 5 to 10 years ago, then I would probably say maybe he capped it at 68 points. But seeing what other guys are doing around the league, especially last season, where we saw Roman Josi led the league in NHL scoring for a defenseman with 96 points, Cale Makar coming in second at 86, Hedman at 85. So definitely we're playing in an era where we're seeing more and more defensemen regularly get over 60 or even 70 points. And for Quinn Hughes, he actually finished 8th last year with 68 points. I'm now wondering if Quinn Hughes has a shot to become a top 5 or possibly even top 3 defenseman in points. And to be quite frank, if he does take that step forward, it would not only make the Canucks a better overall team, but definitely help them win more games, especially those close 2-1, 3-2 games. So back to my main point for question number 2. Do you think Quinn Hughes and Pettersson can propel themselves to the next level as early as this season? Next question. How good is Andrei Kuzmenko? Obviously one of the bigger signings for the Canucks this offseason, and as expected, many Canuck fans are excited about seeing what Kuzmenko can do in the NHL in his first season. The Canucks were able to get him at a pretty decent price. However, probably the main question is how good will he be and what type of numbers can he put up? Many of you have probably done your YouTube scouting like me and saw a whole bunch of KHL YouTube videos, and obviously he looked pretty good over there. In his last season in the K, he was over a point per game player with 20 goals and 53 points in 45 games. However, we can't forget that there's no sample size in the NHL. I feel like it will still take him a little bit of time to adjust to the North American game, because over the years we've seen a lot of KHL players come over, and to be quite frank, some pan out, as in Kaprizov and Panarin, and some actually don't pan out the way that many expect them to. One name that comes to mind is Nikita Gusev, who was really hyped up before he came over and had an okay start to his first NHL season, but then just kind of fizzled out and went back to the K. So obviously I can't predict the future, and I don't know how Kuzmenko will pan out. If you were to ask me, I would say that if he can give you 20 goals and possibly around 40 points or maybe even 45 to 50, then that's a huge win for the Canucks. So my question to you is, how high are you on Kuzmenko, and what type of points do you think he'll put up in his first NHL season? Moving on, let's talk about 2 of the most important questions that many Canuck fans are probably wondering about. Number 1, how does Bruce Boudreau and the Canucks coaching staff balance their offensive depth? Now, compared to prior seasons, it seems like, on paper at least, it looks like the Canucks have one of the deepest teams, especially on offense heading into this season. And don't get me wrong, that's actually a very good problem to have, especially if you pull up their current projected depth chart right now. You can kind of see that they have some very balanced offense, especially in their top 3 lines. However, I feel like this might be a double-edged sword for Boudreau and the staff, as there might not be enough ice time to go around. Since they decided to keep JT Miller around, they also have some veterans like Horvat, Pearson, and Garland, and even Boeser, who is locked in somewhere in the top 6 or top 9. But at the same time, we can't forget about their big free agent signing in Ilya Mikheyev, and then also Kuzmenko, along with 2 younger players in Vasily Podkolzin and Nils Höglander. Now, the first 2 in Mikheyev and Kuzmenko's case, especially for Kuzmenko, would you start off Kuzmenko somewhere in the bottom 6, or would you put him somewhere in the top 2 lines to start off the season? At the same time, with someone like Mikheyev, who is 27 and probably just entering his prime, coming off a pretty good career year with 21 goals, do you start him off in the 3rd line role, or do you bump him up to play with some of the more talented players on your roster? At the same time, does this offensive depth somewhat hinder the development of younger players like Höglander and Podkolzin, as both are 21 and are still developing and trying to find their game at the NHL level? Is there enough ice time on this roster, or will they be given enough opportunities to grow their game? Especially in Podkolzin's case, he finished last season with 14 goals and 26 points, and if he's given an opportunity to eat somewhere in the top 6, I feel like he could definitely double his production. Meanwhile, Höglander is coming off somewhat of a disappointing season, only getting 10 goals and 18 points. But I personally feel like there's still a player there, and he's still very young, so there's definitely more opportunities for him to grow. But heading into this year and seeing how deep the roster is in Vancouver, does everyone have an equal opportunity to develop and play to the potential? Or does Patrik Allvin and friends have to make some tough decisions and possibly move out maybe a player like Pearson or Garland sometime in the middle of the season or at the trade deadline to make room for their younger players? What do you think? What would you do if you were the GM or the coach? Let me know in the comments below. And now the final question, perhaps the most important question surrounding the Canucks heading into this season. Is their defense good enough? Obviously, the Canucks were not a strong defensive team last year, and on paper at least, many people don't actually believe that the Canucks defense are that good. But at the end of the day, results matter, and this team did not make the playoffs last year. Considering how they didn't make any major changes on their defense and is pretty much bringing back the exact same roster they had last year, and maybe you throw in a name like Jack Rathbone as the number 7th or possibly the number 6 guy. Now with that in mind, do you think the Canucks defense is good enough to compete for a playoff spot and possibly be a wild card team? Obviously, we know that if Quinn, Hughes, and Ekman-Larsson stays healthy, then they shouldn't have too much of a problem generating offense. However, on the other end of the ice, this is where many people question the Canucks defense, especially on the right side where we have Tyler Meyers and Luke Schenn possibly penciled in as their top 2 defensemen. Both 32 years old, aren't the most mobile, and probably not as what many consider as the ideal 2 players you want as your top 2 right-handed defensemen, because it's going to be a long season and they will probably have to face some high-octane offensive team like the Edmonton Oilers. And does this decor have enough to stop those type of teams? I'm not too sure. Let me know in the comments below. And if you were Patrik Allvin, would you look to upgrade your defense possibly early in this season or sometime before the trade deadline? And what type of defensemen or players would you target to upgrade your blue line? Let me know in the comments below as well. Do you agree or disagree with everything I said in this video? Make sure you let me know in the comments below. And if you like, feel free to call me out as well. If you want to watch more of my crappy videos, then make sure you click the links on the side right here. Subscribe.